Hello, students! Today we're going to ask a very important question. What really makes a country a democracy? Is it just about having elections? Well, we are going to go beyond the simple definition to really understand what makes a country truly democratic.
So this is our plan for today's lesson. We will start with something familiar, a simple definition, and then we will explore 4 very essential features, one by one. Okay, let's dive right in.
All right, so first things first. In our earlier classes, we learned a very simple way to define democracy. Let's quickly recap that, shall we? Now, this definition, it's a very useful starting point. It helps us tell the difference between a democracy and, say, a non-democracy, like a monarchy or military rule.
But here's a question for you to think about. Is just having elections enough to call a country a democracy? You see, many governments around the world hold elections, but that doesn't automatically make them democratic. And this is exactly why we need to dig a little deeper.
So this brings us to our first big question. It's all about power. Who really has the final say in making the important decisions? To understand this, let's look at the case of Pakistan, specifically under General Pervez Musharraf.
So what happened was this. In 1999, General Musharraf led a military coup. Basically, he overthrew a government that had been democratically elected. And just like that, the power was taken away from the elected leaders.
Then, in 2002, he held something called a referendum to give himself a 5-year extension as president. Now, he did this to try and make his rule look legitimate. But this referendum, it was heavily criticized for being based on fraud and malpractices.
And later that same year, he issued something called a legal framework order. Now, this order gave him the power to dismiss the elected assemblies. So you see, even though elections were held, the final power, that was still with General Musharraf and the army. They were not elected by the people.
And this whole story brings us to our very first feature. This is important, so please remember it. Feature 1 is, in a democracy, the final decision-making power must rest with those elected by the people. The real power has to be with the leaders that the people have chosen. Okay, let's move on to our second feature. We've established that just having elections isn't enough. The elections themselves have to be free and fair. But what does that actually mean?
Well, think about this question. If the same party keeps winning every single election, do the people really have a choice? This helps us understand the difference between just an election and a meaningful one. Let's look at 2 different examples, China and Mexico.
This is very interesting. You see 2 different ways that choice can be limited. On one hand, you have China. Here, people can only choose candidates who are approved by the ruling Communist Party. So there's no real opposition. Then you have Mexico, where until the year 2000, one party always won. Other parties could compete, but the ruling party used all sorts of dirty tricks to ensure it never lost.
And this brings us to our second key feature. A democracy must be based on a free and fair election where those who are currently in power have a fair chance of losing. This is so important. There must be a genuine choice for the people.
All right, now for our third feature. This one is all about equality. In a democracy, we say the people vote, but who are these people? And is everyone's vote treated equally? Let's look at a few examples. In Saudi Arabia, for instance, women didn't even have the right to vote until 2015. Or look at Estonia, where citizenship rules made it very hard for the Russian minority to get voting rights. And in Fiji, the system is designed in such a way that the vote of an indigenous Fijian has more value than the vote of an Indian Fijian. All these examples show us that when some citizens are denied an equal right to vote, democracy is weakened.
So, here is our third feature, and it is a fundamental principle of democracy. It's called universal adult franchise. It's very simple, but also very powerful. In a democracy, each adult citizen must have one vote, and each vote must have one value. One person, one vote, one value.
Okay, so the people have voted and a government has been formed. But does the job of democracy end there? The answer is no, not at all. Let's think about this. What happens after an election is over? Does a winning party have the right to do whatever it wants? To explore this, let's look at the example of Zimbabwe under Robert Mugabe.
In Zimbabwe, the ruling party, ZANU-PF, was led by Robert Mugabe. Now, he was very popular, and his party won every election since 1980. But they often used unfair practices. Over the years, his government kept changing the constitution to give itself more and more power, becoming less accountable to the people. And just look at what happened. Opposition party workers were harassed, public protests were declared illegal, TV and radio were controlled by the government, and the government even ignored court judgments that went against it. This shows us something very important. Even a government that is elected by the people can be undemocratic if it doesn't respect the basic rights of its citizens.
This brings us to our fourth and final feature for today. A democratic government rules within limits set by constitutional law and citizens' rights. This means a government can't just do whatever it wants simply because it won an election. It must obey the law and protect the rights of everyone.
So, let's quickly summarize what we have learned. These four features are like a test for any true democracy. First, final decisions are made by elected leaders. Second, elections must be free and fair with a real choice. Third, each adult has one vote and each vote has one value. And fourth, the government is limited by the Constitution and citizens' rights. Together, these features help us tell a real democracy from one that only pretends to be one.
So, now I ask you, can you tell a real democracy from a fake one? Keep these four features in your mind. They are the tools you need to analyze any government and understand how truly democratic it is. That is all for today's explainer. Thank you.